Gentlemen, it is 1 o'clock sharp, so we would like to start our session for the afternoon. First of all, for the CCS-related experts, there will be 4 such experts who will be giving us presentation. First of all, from RITE, Research Institute of Innovative Technology for the Earth, the group leader of Systems Analysis Group, Professor Akimoto will be giving presentation on the role of CCS and the challenges for the large deployments. Professor, please. Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Akimoto from RITE. Today, it is a great honor to be given this invaluable opportunity. As has been introduced, I will be talking about the role of CCS and the challenges. My specialty is energy as a whole, making analysis and assessment. So from that perspective, I would like to speak to you how we position CCS in the overall energy strategy. Let me give you a global overview and then the outlook for Japan, and then lastly touch upon financial issues as well as how to create a conducive environment. So first of all, giving you the overview. In order to achieve carbon neutrality, what are the tools and options available? I have given in terms of primary energy. I have, first of all, listed energy saving. In order to achieve carbon neutrality, energy savings continues to be important. But what about the other energy? There are 3 major principles to go for nuclear energy or renewables or fossil fuel plus CCS. So there are only 3 options. So, if I may say so, it is quite simple. Although the illustration itself is rather complicated, at the bottom, and still, the emission from the fossil fuels will continue to remain, and you need to have offset technology to be utilized in order to achieve carbon neutrality, which means that we should go for BECCS and DACS, the carbon removals. We have afforestation as a method, but this is quite limited in terms of reduction potential. And especially in Japan, the land area is quite small, and the forests are quite mature. So I don't think we have that much of a latitude going forward. Then what about blue the carbon and so forth, blue hydrogen? Those are also very important, but the CO2 photosynthesis is quite quick to produce algae, but if it gets too thick and too deep into the water, the photosynthesis will not be that effective. So I don't think there will be that much of a potential for Japan either. Therefore, BECCS and DACS will be the mainstay technologies. So these would be very important options. Rather than directly removing those carbon in the atmosphere, it will be highly efficient to go for the BECCS and DACS. But what about the other energy options? Of course, we need renewables as well as nuclear energy. So how to combine those 3 major options? Now, inside Japan, we need to increase renewables. But the cost of renewables, relatively speaking, is quite high for Japan, and potential is smaller in Japan compared to the overseas. Therefore, bring in the renewables from overseas, and then to have the CCS and storage to be done, first of all, in the other countries, and convert into blue hydrogen, and then bring over to Japan. That is another option available. Now, looking at the whole of the world, according to the IPCC AR6, this is a chart taken from that report, looking at the fossil fuels prospects as well as CCS. The Paris Agreement, a 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise in order to achieve this target. On the right-hand side, you can see the fossil fuels. Under the 1.5 degrees scenario, we need to reduce fossil fuels as much as possible. Then would it be brought down to zero? I don't think so. Even with 1.5 degrees target, I think half or even more than half the fossil fuels will remain for most of the quantitative analyses and the scenarios. And our model analysis result is also included in these charts. It is more of a median level. And the year 2050, 40% to 50% of fossil fuels remain. That, I believe, would be more realistic. When we speak of carbon neutrality, you always have the image that renewables will be 100% in the energy mix. I don't think so. The models still present that fossil fuels will continue to be utilized, but it will be made more efficient, and the emissions will be further reduced through other means. So, which means you need to have CCS added to the fossil fuel. For example, at the bottom, it says coal with CCS and gas with CCS. So in the 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees scenario, CCS will be on the rise. And this is more rational, economically speaking. And this is also taken from IPCC AR6. Now, the CDR. I have mentioned about the CDR. The direct removal of the carbon. And also, if we are to achieve carbon neutrality, there are 5 typical scenarios. Of 5, in the 4 scenarios, CDR, the negative emission option is being undertaken, which is quite reasonable. Where it says LD, this scenario out of the 5, where the energy saving will be increased, so afforestation will be enough to achieve the target. But the majority of the IPCC scenarios are more of a negative emission-based scenarios, like BECCS, using bioenergy with CCS, to make it more negative. But more recently, DAX is also collecting a lot of attention. But the models are not that well developed yet. So including DAX through CDR to achieve carbon neutrality. This is the pathway indicated by IPCC. In the main body of the AR6, still hard-to-abate industries may remain. So CDR would be something unavoidable and inevitable. Renewables and the CCS alone would not be able to achieve the carbon neutrality. Now I would like to turn to Japan. RITE has developed certain models, and we have made analysis using these models. Last year, the government of Japan have revised its the basic energy as a strategy, and the scenarios that have been renewed, including the directions indicated by the government. But in the interest of time, I will not give you details of how we have created the model. Although we have made analysis on Japan. Everything is linked together on a worldwide basis. So this model do have analysis on the whole world, but today I will be focusing on Japan. We have assessment up until the year 2100. Especially, I will be focusing upon 2050, how to achieve carbon neutrality by then. We have evaluation up until 2100 is because including the storage potential, if we don't have a more long-term scenario, it may indicate that all of a sudden there will be a depletion after the year 2050. So we have looked at the whole period up until the 2100. So please keep in mind that this is about Japan. In our country, even though we would like to increase the renewables, there are constraints in terms of grid connection. In Hokkaido, there is a lot of potential for wind power. But even though we would like to increase the wind power, the demand is in the Kanto area. So you need to bring forth and transport the renewables power generation. And the grid system right now is not adequate enough. So we need to make significant investments to try to develop the sufficient enough the grid system. But if we are to make investments, that would mean higher electricity tariffs. And with the grid system to be expanded, we need to have a efficiency of a lower level. So we should not just depend upon renewables. We need to go for optimum mix. Thus, we need to increase the CCS opportunities. And I have taken solar PV and wind power. If we are to increase these two energy sources, how much of an integrated cost will go up? In particular, in Japan, we will have spiraling of such integrated costs. So how to deal with this question is the challenge for us. In the interest of time, I will not be able to go into all the scenarios, taking the scenario at the very top. Inside Japan in 2050, to achieve carbon neutrality, that is not what we are contemplating. We will look at when the whole world is trying to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2050 and achieve 1.5 degree scenario. What can Japan do? The CDR technology may be cheaper in the other countries as compared to Japan. So the choice will be whether it will be cheaper to do it in Japan or do it elsewhere. So perhaps doing it overseas and having a bilateral credit mechanism being utilized, it may be much more inexpensive. So you need to think about the plan B, the alternative scenarios. So this is what I would like to ask you to keep in mind. Now, this is about Japan. In order to achieve carbon neutrality in the year 2050, we have looked at least cost scenario. But there are a lot of uncertainties ahead in the future, so we have more than one scenario being made available. The second one, the renewable energy cost will be reduced more than expected. And thirdly, if we can utilize more nuclear power. And fourthly, when hydrogen production cost comes down, what then? And five, the CCS storage would be made available easier in Japan. What happens then? And the sixth scenario is utilizing synthetic fuel. Some people call it e-methane. So if it is much cheaper, when CCU is much cheaper, what will be the case then? And seventh, there will be the demand being changed. Now, if I may introduce the scenario further in depth for nuclear energy, a standard to be utilized up until 10%. The ceiling is 10%, but there is a rapid increase in discussion of replacing the decommissioned reactors with new builds. So perhaps we can say the ceiling could be brought up to 20%. Now, on ad hoc basis, in the 2100, 91 million tons, if we could use the CCUS up to that extent, that would not be enough. So we will be able to have the geological storage outside of Japan. And that is mentioned in the second the line under CCUS, transportation to overseas. And we are looking at all of these assumptions in our scenario. Now, as to the result of our analysis, in the year 2050, the greenhouse gas emissions by sector. On the left-hand side, this is the actual numbers, and then next to that will be the year 2050. The first scenario is inclusive of overseas locations, the least cost case of achieving carbon neutrality. How much should we reduce in Japan? The result of our analysis said only reduction by 63%. So 37% emission remains. And for the remaining part, we will offset by the credits, and that would be more cost-effective. But with economic point of view, can we have agreement with the other countries? That is another separate question. So it still remains to be seen whether we will be able to achieve the scenario or not. 200 million tons worth of emissions still remains. It cannot be a carbon neutral, 100%. So there will be still sectors remaining where the emissions will continue to be seen. But then you need to have means to offset. Afforestation is one way to go, but the volume is not that large. So the largest one will be the DAX. And we do use the BECS partially, but DAX is the major solution. So in Japan, to try to directly remove CO2 from the atmosphere, inside Japan, if we are to achieve carbon neutrality, this may be absolutely necessary to be done. But then, in order to have the same effect, it would be much cheaper if you can do it overseas. So inclusive of that possibility, we need to further make analysis. Next, this is the balance between the capture and storage. The green is to capture from coal-fired power plants, and the blue means capture from the gas-fired power plants, and the purple shows the DAX. So we have several options combined together. And the yellow means the storage inside Japan. But the assumption is the maximum, 91 million tons. So that would be the ceiling, and it will be economically reasonable. Yes, people say that CCS is quite expensive. That is true. But compared to the other technological options, if you are to reduce that much, CCS is quite cost-effective. So it will be desirable to use up until the maximum. So, if possible, we can transport what has been captured to overseas and have storage in the other countries. We have included that possibility in our scenario. Next. This is looking at the primary energy, the total supply. On the left-hand side is the 2015, on the right-hand side, 2050. Looking at the whole world, we are trying to minimize the cost overall. And the gray and red, those are coal and oil. And we need to reduce significantly. So it is about 63% reduction. The blue is for gas. It can continue to be used because the CO2 intensity is quite low. So this is also a possible option. But then we need to utilize hydrogen and ammonia, the purple colored portion. We need to add on CCS. To achieve carbon neutrality inside Japan, in any case, solar PV and wind power need to be increased, and we need to utilize CCS. And if there is still a shortage, we need to import blue ammonia and blue hydrogen from overseas. To increase renewables, this is a must. But it means that it will be highly costly. So if we are to go for optimization, we need to utilize CCS technologies and also import blue hydrogen or blue ammonia from the other countries into Japan. Looking at the power generation sector, we need to go for further electrification, but electricity tariffs are going up. The CCS will also be important for this sector.
Now, look at the cost side. The second line on the right. Overseas CDR can be considered to minimize costs. That means as 168 is the marginal cost reduction. If we want to do this in Japan, it would be more than 500. So the cost is higher in Japan by a factor of 3. But if CCUS can be utilized, it can be reduced to a level of 400. Therefore, the impact can be very significant. We have to also look at other data as well. Now, over here, we have conducted analysis. CO2 reduction comparable is shown on the horizontal axis, and the cost of pigment is shown here. This is a busy graph. But you can see that the cost in Japan, as well as the potential, can be identified. That it is being modeled analysis. And if you want to carbon neutral, 1,000 megatons will be required, and the GHG carbon neutral will also be required, as you can see here. But look at the right-hand side because it's very complex. In which cost range the prevailing technologies are shown. We have solar PV and wind power in yellow. It is low cost. To a certain extent, but there is a negative cost as well. But in terms of economic rationale, it is already cheap. And in 2050, the cost will be likely to be lower. But if we want to increase the volume, the unfavorable renewable energies will have to be utilized. So that means increased cost. So supply and demand balancing will require significant costs. So dramatically, cost will increase. So the range is mixed from bottom to top. On the other hand, nuclear power is shown here below. But the usage will depend on social constraint. About that, CCS is positioned. It is within this range, $50 to $250. This is also mixed. Cost will be diverse, depending on favorable to unfavorable. But according to our estimate, 50 to 250. And we also have H2 hydrogen-based DRI. And in fact, it could be lower than a domestic CCS. But if we can do this in Japan, it is a lower cost, if it is feasible in Japan. On top of that, we have ducts at the very top. In order to achieve carbon neutrality, ducts will be required. But very dilute CO2 will have to be captured for storage. So the constraints as well as the potential will have to be fully considered and come up with the best mix. In terms of carbon price context, when the emissions trading system is introduced, the price will determine the upper limit. Below that, cost effectiveness will determine the economic rationale. In that perspective, this is very important as well. I'm sorry to be rushed, but moving on to the investment side, I will briefly touch upon this. On the part of the Japanese government, The climate transition finance has been promoted. A transition method is a concern for the Japanese government. For there are activities going on, such as the guidelines that have been formulated last year. Next page, please. Now, we have been formulating the roadmap by sectors. This is one example for iron and steel. There is the chemical, power sector, gas, and others. So we have of different sectors, CCS. The timing of introduction, when it will be required, have been identified in this roadmap. Using this, foreseeability of investment can be enabled. When CCS will be necessary, 1.5 degrees, 60 degree target alignment will also be clarified as well. Finance sector will find it easier to make investment in these areas. And in fact, fossil fuel investment is often criticized as greenwashing. We have to make sure that is not the case. That is the reason why the direction going forward must be clarified so that it can enable investment. Last fiscal year, a think tank has made this evaluation on the part of right. Using a model, we are trying to align according to 1.5 degree and 2 degree for the different sectors. A roadmap formulation is being promoted. Once it is completed, we will come back to this group to report. For the role of CCS in each of the different sectors can be identified over time going forward. This is for the power generation sector. On the part of government today, the long-term decarbonized power promotion is being discussed. Because power generation requires a long-term investment, therefore the foreseeability of return on investment will be required, especially inclusive of CCS. Facility cost will increase. We need to have a scheme to facilitate such financing. In fact, this discussion is going on as we speak for possible introduction next year for hydrogen as well as ammonia. Power generation will have this applied as well for CCS to enable this process as a framework. I am strongly asserting this point to be included. By so doing, we hope that investment in CCS can be facilitated, and I believe that improvements are being made today. This is a specific system. We have the hydrogen ammonia biomass, LNG, hydrogen ammonia, CCS. So it takes time for CCS to be constructed and to start operation. So a long-term time summit will be required so that the CC investment can be facilitated as a framework. Government is trying to accommodate this today. Therefore, we hope that this will function so that relative low-cost CCS can take root here in Japan as well. That will be of the utmost importance. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. Just going on to the next page. A JX transition bond is also being discussed today in December. In the relevant committee, it will be presented inclusive of carbon pricing. This is to be promoted as mentioned here. CCS business law will also be introduced. In pursuing a business, there has to be foreseeability in terms of legislation. This is as important as finance side as well. By combining these initiatives, CCS must be promoted in a steadfast manner. This is my last page. I'm sorry that I've run out of time, so I'm not going to go through all these conclusion points. But as I mentioned at the outset, energy system overall expert is my position. So I'm not just calling for CCS. Renewable energy as well as nuclear power is also necessary as well. But in the absence of CCS, cost optimization in Japan in terms of energy system establishment is not possible. And therefore, CCS must be evaluated in an appropriate manner in the business scheme as well as in the system scheme. This scheme must be established, and government is working on this to facilitate this process. And I'd like to ask for your continued support. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Akimoto. So there are many different options for decarbonizations from a fair and equitable position. You have made analysis, and you have also mentioned a lot about the CCS. It is not that we are promoting just the CCS. We need a portfolio of mixture of different technologies, but CCS is becoming more and more realistic from cost perspective as well. I keenly feel that myself. If you have any questions or comments, the Professor Akimoto, please raise your hand. So, all right, those of you who are joining on virtual basis, there seems to be no question received. So I'd like to thank Professor Akimoto. Once again, a big applause for him. Thank you. Now, we would like to invite from JOGMEC, from Hydrogen and CCS Project Department, Dr. Sakura Nishioka will be discussing JOGMEC's latest activities and organizational change for accelerating CCS deployment. Please.
I am Sakura Nishioka, Deputy Director, Hydrogen CCS Department, JOGMEC. It's my great pleasure to speak at this Japan CCS Forum. I thank you especially for Global CCS Institute for your tremendous and continuous support to upscale CCS all around the world. Well, since today's forum is focusing on finance, I would like to introduce our new finance support scheme for carbon capture and storage project, as well as some updates on JOGMEC's latest activities. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, first of all, let me briefly introduce our organization, JOGMEC, for those who might not be familiar with us. We are a state-owned governmental agency under Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. What we aim is to secure a stable supply of energy and natural resources for Japan. I mean, Japanese industry and people's lives in Japan. We are 53 years old and have kept working on mostly upstream development of oil, gas, coal, and metals. And we also work on geothermal energy development, and we also do stockpiling of resources and mine pollution control. And for each of them, we conduct activities in the blue box in the bottom. Well, we conduct geological survey, marine resources survey. We actually own 2 cutting-edge research vessels. And we do conduct technical research and also research for policy and regulations, which is my role. And also we provide financial support, which are equity investment and loan guarantee for SPC, a special purpose company which involves Japanese entities. And just last month, November, we have renamed Japan Organization for Metals and Energy Security. Well, the abbreviation JOGMEC remains the same though. Well, and at the same time, we have established new functions officially that include geological surveys and financial support for carbon capture and storage, hydrogen and ammonia, and domestic offshore wind. It's a huge change for us. Well, we decided to do this because diversification of organizational portfolio is the key for ensuring energy security. So we, of course, continuously work on oil and gas development as well, and they should be combined with CCS for sure. Okay, next slide, please. These are our activities in the field of carbon capture and storage. We have a technology center in Chiba Prefecture and conduct R&D listed here. Because we have accumulated subsurface technology for almost a half century, we are sort of big team of engineers for these listed studies. We conduct site screening and site selection, site characterization, evaluation of well integrity, modeling and simulation, and monitoring and model calculation. These are obviously the core technologies at the heart of safe CCS operations. And also we work on facility technologies, including membrane development and synthetic fuel and more. And looking at the right hand, we publish guidelines. CCS guideline, this is the one written for the purpose of promoting CCS business. This provides technical recommendation from site selection to site closure. Another one is GHGCI, carbon intensity guidelines. This intends to provide our own recommendation for calculating GHG emissions and carbon intensity for LNG, hydrogen, and ammonia. And this includes the calculation of methane emissions as well. We are going to expand this guideline to include other forms of energy such as synthetic methane, e-methane, and we also started to measure greenhouse gases from aircraft and drones collaborating with ANA and JAXA. ANA is All Nippon Airways and JAXA is Japanese NASA. That surely contribute to expand this guideline. Well, with this activity, we aim to prevent unspecified methane emissions and verify reported greenhouse gas emissions. We also analyze and share the trend and updates related to CCS projects with Japanese companies. Well, one of our great data sources is definitely CCS in the news sent by Global CCS Institute every day. So we, Geogamic team, thank Global CCS Institute for your daily work. And we are very actively working on establishing partnerships for both the public and private stakeholders. For example, we had no chance to talk to a carbon market community before, though now we closely work with them in order to develop carbon accounting methodologies by CCS activities. Well, you know that CCS value chain is pretty much diversified, and it involves sectors we, as energy developer, haven't closely worked with before. So we are trying to be open and would like to have a conversation with any stakeholders. And I think working together, crossing industry boundaries is very critical when it comes to establishing value chain. Okay, next slide, please. This map shows our ongoing projects relating to CCS. Currently, there are 4 ammonia-related projects in progress in Indonesia, Australia, and Abu Dhabi. Well, we conduct these feasibility studies which aim to explore the possibility to establish entire supply chain, including the production of clean fuel ammonia from natural gas, which encompasses CCS, CCU, and biosequestration, marine transportation to Japan, and utilization of ammonia as a fuel for power generation and marine use and financing. Also, 2 enhanced oil recovery projects are ongoing in Indonesia and Japan. Well, I understand there is concern around EOR, but we see EOR as a reasonable option, at least during the energy transition period, because it technically reduces certain amount of CO2 emissions. In this sense, we are now in the process of establishing CO2 EOR guideline, which aim to provide how to design a CO2 EOR project as CCS, how to quantify the CO2 emission reduction amount by CO2 EOR project. Next slide, please. Okay, finally, let me briefly explain our new support scheme for CCS. Well, JOGMEC promotes and supports CCS projects conducted in overseas and the coastal waters of Japan, which involves Japanese companies' participation. In other words, at this time, domestic onshore project is out of our scope. Well, we provide geological study for pre-study phase, and for exploration phase, we provide equity investment. Then after FID, we are eligible to provide equity investment and or loan guarantee for SPC, which involves Japanese entity. Okay, there is one frequently asked question, which is, could capture or transportation be eligible for the financial support? The answer is, in case the capture or transportation activity is a part of stretch activities, or in other words, somehow capture or transportation is important element for stretch activities, it could be considered eligible, but only for OPEX, no CAPEX support for capture or transportation. And please note that basically our evaluation team assesses the proposal on case-by-case basis, so please contact us for consultation if you're interested. Okay, next one, please. These are a couple of examples of our support scheme for a pre-study phase. Our geologists conduct exploration for potential stretch sites. For example, we have already conducted screening study for CCS suitable sites in ASEAN. The outcomes are shared with private companies and governmental institutions of ASEAN. For your information, we are going to hold a joint workshop with Asia CCS Network in this coming February, where our experts will be explaining the result of the study. So if you are interested, please join. I assume the Secretariat will upload the information on their website very soon. Well, another picture, this is our own 3D survey vessel called Tansa. This cutting-edge vessel can be lent out for private company survey projects. Well, I wondered and asked the department in charge, how much does it cost and how long it can be lent out? And they say, oh, please be aware this is the only one ship in the world and we don't have two. And I couldn't get the answer. Okay, next slide, please. This is a bit detailed explanation of our support for exploration and stretch phase after FID. This figure explains a sort of big picture. We will back a species project by providing financial guarantee, probably together with governmental financial institutions such as JBIC, Japan Bank for International Cooperation. You see the estimated scale of support for each development phase. Regarding the maximum amount of equity capital and loan guarantee for individual projects, it has not been set. Well, it's assumed that they will be within our budgetary limits. And also, let me add the loan guarantee fee rates are also under consideration. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. Please feel to contact me at any time if you have any inquiries, questions, whatever. You are most welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nishioka-san. On the part of JOGMEC, traditionally, the oil and natural gas, coal, these types of businesses have been promoted, but now you are expanding your scope to CCS, which is very encouraging for us. And I'd like to ask for the continued support from JOGMEC. Oh, questions for Nishioka-san? Please raise your hand if you have any questions for Nishioka-san. There seem not. We have not received any questions online either. So we would like to thank Dr. Nishioka once again.
続きまして、国際排出権取引協会 IETA の、上級顧問森島隆様より、炭素市場における共通基準策定のための活動と動向というタイトルでご報告、ご講演いただきます。森島さん、どうぞ。
He will, next speaker is Morishima-san. He will be talking on the trends and activities to develop the common standards for carbon markets. He is the senior advisor of the International Emissions Trading Association, IETA. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Morishima of IETA. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. On my part, I would like to talk about the standards and standardization for the carbon markets. I'd like to talk about the state and the direction going forward. Please refer to the next slide. First of all, I'd like to give you some information regarding IETA, our organization. So, who we are. We are working on the emissions reductions, which is effective and global. International framework is what we would like to establish, and it's an organization which is an NPO, non-profit business organization established in June of 1999. In 2005, the Clean Development Mechanism reform was when we had made a proposal. In 2014, on the other hand, at the Paris COP meeting, we made a proposal leading to Article 6 in 2015. It has been adopted as Article 6. In the subsequent year, for the EU ETS, we put forth a proposal, which has then subsequently been adopted. So these are some of the contributions that we have made on the part of IETA. Let's now discuss our mission. Business community is working on greenhouse gases and interested in emissions trading. We are providing support to such entities and to establish an effective market-based trading system to reduce carbons. Next page, please. At the end of August, we had approximately 230 members, mainly companies. Energy industry is included. Carbon credit developers are also included. These two groups account for half of our membership. Now, why do we need the carbon credit trading market globally? The reason is shown here. On the part of IETA, we worked at Maryland University, looking at the NDC's achievement of each country. If countries did this independently, or it has been compared to global free trading, and the price for carbon has been identified. So price is lower at the beginning, but then it becomes higher. Black is where international trading can be conducted freely. So rather than having individual countries pursuing this, on average, the global initiative will be half in terms of price. And with the same investment, the reduction impact can be half. Well, the investment required would be half. On this page, we are looking at the Japan's NDC and offset for 2013, fiscal year 2020, and the target for 2030. Last year, we have made an upward revision significantly, and at 2030, international carbon credit procurement may be necessary to achieve this goal. As for the carbon market, last year at the Glasgow COP26, historical agreement has been reached. This is Article 6.2 has been agreed to, and therefore between two countries, upon agreement, in order to reduce double count, corresponding adjustment will be required. But at any rate, the carbon credit can be introduced into NDC of a different country. This is a epoch-making agreement. Because of this impact, carbon credit issuance has increased significantly this year. However, having said that, compared to the time when we had CDM, the issuance has not reached that level yet. And currently, voluntary carbon market are accounting for a major portion of these issuance. Furthermore, in terms of carbon credit as well as for carbon offset, there are skeptical views. There are people in opposition that is quite strong. Therefore, we need further efforts to increase the credibility as well as the trustworthiness of this mechanism. Voluntary carbon market as well as compliance are similar. There are different standards and protocols. There are many in the voluntary area, and also in the corresponding compliance side, there are many. And definitions, what is good or bad, are mixed. And therefore, in order to consider international trading, we need the standardization, common factors, as well as ultimately convergence will be required. Now, for the volunteer carbon market standardization, this year there have been two major proposals. So allow me to give further explanation on these initiatives. First of all, in VCM, the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, VCM, has been established for the carbon credit. Core carbon principles have been presented, and public consultation has been made. We are now evaluating the result of the public consultation. On the other hand, the procurement side, we have VCMI, Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative. Another proposal has been presented, which is called the Claims Code of Practice. Public consultation has been made, and the final drafting process is underway. So let's first of all talk about the core carbon principles. The carbon credit that is going to be issued will have to be based on core carbon principle. That is the recommendation. Globally, all the carbon credits that are issued should have core carbon principles applied. This is the ultimate objective of this initiative. For the 10 carbon principles, I'm sure they are reasonable. And number 3 is no double counting. And number 4 is talking about permanence. It has to be a permanent result. I'm sure it does not seem irregular for anyone. In reality, these core carbon principles are in 3 stages. Under the principles, we also have the specific carbon credit required framework. There's a 180-page document attached. The procedure for certification has been attached as well. It's an overall draft. And within the framework, permanence risk is identified. If there is risk, it's a reversible risk, so we need something to compensate that. It has to be attached to carbon credit. For example, there are several options available. Monitoring over 50 years is a good case in point. Monitoring could be 25 years, but for the remaining period, some kind of guarantee will be provided. Option 3 could be a special initiative which are equal to these two options. So the requirements for the carbon credit are laid down. Regarding procedures, on the other hand, with the certifying body of this organization will have to certify the carbon credit. On the part of IETA, from our members, we have considered the opinions of our members, and if the certifying body is going to conduct the certification of all the carbon credit, in terms of putting it into practice would be very challenging. Therefore, they should consider the utilization of existing certifying bodies so that a feasible process can be introduced. This is the proposal that has been made by IETA for this area. Next, the uses of carbon credit and the claims code of practice for this group has been proposed. There are 4 stages. Meet the prerequisites is the first one. And identify the claims to make by the companies. 3, purchase high-quality credit. And 4, good disclosure must be made. By 2050, carbon neutrality is the ultimate objective. So I believe that nothing out of the ordinary is included here. Here, the companies can select the claim. They are either gold, silver, or bronze. Only 3 options are available. What is very challenging here is that in 2030, emissions could be reduced to a certain target. And if this target may be achieved, but there will be residual emissions. In the case of gold, the total amount will have to be offset by carbon credit. Even in bronze, 20% of the remaining unabated emissions will have to be offset. As for scopes 1, 2, and 3 altogether. So for the hard-to-abate sectors, as well as companies with large scope 3 emissions, they would have to offset everything, or even to offset 20%. Significant funding will be required, so it will be very difficult to make these claims. Based on this situation, on the part of IETA, we have solicited the views of our members on this topic. By industry sector, different flexibility should be afforded. Otherwise, there will be no motivation to take part in this. And even though it is presented, there could be a shortage of participants. Third-party certification is also important as well. This cost will have to be taken into consideration. These are some of the views we have presented. So we have talked about the supply side as well as the buy side proposals. There is also the market that falls in between the supply side and buy side. The World Bank is taking the initiative to establish the climate warehouse situated between the supply side and buy side. Let me give you a further explanation. This is the concept of the climate warehouse. It's a registry. And having communication amongst the registry and data visualization will be promoted. Make it easy for everybody to see. Transparency and traceability and reliability must be enhanced. That is the purpose of the climate warehouse. Let me talk about the specific action taken by this warehouse. At the very top, we have registries. There are boxes. From registries are different from country to country currently, and if it's voluntary, there are different registries for organizations. There are also regional registries that are again different, and data are stored in each registry. There is no connectivity or standardization amongst the registries. Now, if you were to purchase a carbon credit, and if you look for CCS projects, it's not easy to find. You have to go through each registry to find such an applicable CCS project. Therefore, there is an initiative by the World Bank to have a common platform in the form of climate warehouse. It doesn't have to be absolutely accurate. For each registry, the difference of the registry should be understood, and based on that premise, make it available for everyone to use. That is a type of platform or framework that is being established. So if all goes well, all the registries will be using the same framework, and the search side will also be looking at the same framework. This is the World Bank's view. So this is the type of data that will be stored. I'm not going to go into details, but for one, in order to have traceability, what is required? Blockchain technology will be utilized to ensure the reliability of traceability. The status of the credit, who holds it, and has it been retired, can be traced using the blockchain technology. Having entered this year, we have started phase 1 testing. Phase 1 testing has started, and phase 2, the Japanese government participated in August. Phase 3 was completed, so feasibility has been verified. As a result of this testing, on the part of IATA, as well as World Bank and the Singapore government, jointly established an organization called the Climate Action Data Trust. Basically, a framework that can use the database can be provided. As mentioned here, unified carbon credit registry data is the objective. All the data will be stored in this one framework so that the convenience and transparency and reliability can be enhanced. So far, volunteer carbon market activities have been introduced. Now let's look at the compliance side, referring to the next slide. This is the initiative of the IOSCO, which stands for International Organization of Securities Commissions. So it's an international organization to supervise the security commissions. The Ministry of Finance as well as FSA is participating from Japan. Proposal was made at COP27, and in February next year, a public comment process will be implemented for the compliance market. Proposal is being made. These are the recommendations. I hope that this will be a good reference for you. Please refer to the next slide. This is my last slide. Last year at COP26, Article 6 has been agreed to. With that, international carbon credit trading is attracting significant attention, but there are many challenges that must be overcome. In terms of standardization, there are some activities that are ongoing, which I've talked about today. It isn't as if we can have a conclusion immediately, but it will be a gradual process. In that sense, I think the progress has been made that raises expectations for the future. Thank you.
森島さん、ありがとうございました。
Mr. Morishima, thank you very much. Now, we would like to take questions or comments, if any.
You want? Yes. Sarah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I had a question on the point on permanence and didn't know if you had further information in terms of the discussions for credits. How many years in terms of monitoring and verifying permanence are those conversations currently based on?
Yeah. So I think your question is about the core carbon principle, the framework, and about the permanence. Yeah. And 基本的な考え方
Basically, within one procedure, all the carbon credits will be included. Therefore, it does not stipulate whether it is for CCS or not. But in terms of permanence, requirement is in place. So for this requirement of permanence, we have to identify whether there is risk or not. If there is a risk involved, for that risk, measures will be required. What is optimal is option 1, 2, and 3 will be presented, and make sure that the carbon credit is within the scope of 1, 2, or 3, and that will be checked at the time of certification. And according to the current draft proposal, first one is monitoring period is more than 50 years. Second, 25 years monitoring, plus offer some kind of guarantee. And third option is, in the absence of 1 or 2, another measure will be required. But this another measure is not being defined. When it was formulated, the prevailing discussions that have led to this conclusion is not clear. And against this backdrop, according to public consultation, there are many views that have been expressed, but it is not disclosed. So we don't know what kind of discussions are taking place there. And it will take more time for the outcome to be presented. So we have no choice but to wait.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Let me check the online participants. Actually, I have one question for online. For J credit, I think there is a carbon cap. Oh, but whether there is a carbon cap or not? I think it's a question for Morishima-san. For J credit, is there a carbon cap, the upper limit? What is the prevailing situation globally? There is a upper limit carbon cap. That's what it says. For J credit, regarding J credit, so let me just read this out. Is there a carbon? Well, I'm sorry, that's not very clear. I'm not familiar, or I'm not an expert on J credit, so I shall refrain from answering that question. Any further questions? Well, I have a question for you. So globally, in different regions, there are different emissions trading taking place. There are different methodologies adopted. And you said the three options, 50-year monitoring. Is that a recommendation that is going to be made by IATA to these different emission trading systems? ICVCM principle is that there should be one benchmark or one standard for the setting the rules for issuing carbon credit. Then the quality will be stable, and parties will be reassured in engaging in trading. So that is what is being recommended, something of a standard. But if it's too stringent in terms of standard, there'll be less participant. If it's too lenient, on the other hand, low quality players will also enter. So striking the right balance is the purpose of this proposal. But as I've already mentioned today, it's not a CCS dedicated standard. It's an overall standard. And from the point of view of different experts, they might be skeptical. For CCS, for example, usually it's after 20 years. After finished, monitoring period is 20 years. But beyond that, the country will be responsible. But the responsibility of the operator will end at 20 years. And if there is a government guarantee, it will continue to be guaranteed. But in the core carbon principles, it says that from the point of view of permanence or reversal risk, stipulation is such that it is not fully evaluated, and based on the public consultation, I'm sure that discussions are taking place internally. And we have to remember that this is voluntary. Recommended for parties to use this. If parties are interested in issuing carbon credit, and if it's too challenging, they are free not to use it. That means that we don't have a common standard where people can be reassured. A certification system or certified carbon credit discussion will have to continue. There's no change. So we hope that this will be a good starting point for this discourse. I think it could be a turning point. That is our expectation. Thank you very much. I think we can revisit this topic during the panel discussion as well. So please share later during the panel discussion. So let's give Morishima-san a big applause to show our appreciation. Thank you.
では続きまして、
Next, we would like to move on to the very last presentation to be given today. For the presentation session, we would like to have the person from TMNF, Green Transformation Task Force, the leader of the CCS team. We would like to have Kobayashi-san to provide us with a talk titled Carbon Capture and Storage from the Risk and Insurance Perspective. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for the introduction, Namba-san. Once again, if I may, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kobayashi. I belong to the TMNF. Nice to meet you all. First and foremost, may I thank everyone for providing me with this opportunity. Today, I would like to talk from the perspective of the insurance company. The knowledge of the insurance company is something that we would like to share with the people who belong to the CCS industry. Would you please move on to the next slide? Thank you. Today, here is what I would like to talk about. First, I would like to talk about the view of of the CCS from the standpoint of the insurance company, especially in regards to the risk and so on. First and foremost, I would like to provide you with the overview. And then, in relation to the value chain of the CCS, what sort of concepts do we adopt against the risks? But up to what level have we been able to cover? And as an insurance company, what sort of directions are we heading for? Those are the kind of things that I would like to share with you today. Would you please move on to the next slide? First and foremost, at the TMNF, what are we doing is what I would like to explain to you to begin with. For there are some who are participating from outside of Japan. If I may, I would like to give a recap about the TMNF. We belong to the Tokyo Marine Group, and we are actually the origin of the group. And not only in Japan but globally, we can be considered as one of the largest insurance company. And within Japan, we are the largest insurance company with the longest history. Up until now, we have been working on solving of the societal issues to provide and present the values to our customers. It goes without saying that currently, the biggest issue that we are facing in the society is the measures against the global warming, the climate change. Therefore, against that backdrop, in the last year, in order to deal with the climate change, and in order to attend for the movement for the decarbonization, we decided to establish our direction, as you see here, the green transformation as a whole. Through the insurance industry, we would like to provide the support for. Especially, we believe that the CCS is one of the critical technologies necessary. Therefore, we have established a dedicated team, and we have been working on the studying and researching in regards to the risks and the insurance associated with it. Originally, we have been involved with the upstream and downstream energy industry for the oil and gas. We have been engaging with these in industry, and we have been providing services to them for a long time. And we believe our track record there can be quite useful for the CCS as well. Though the CCS industry, especially in Japan, is still at the early stage of studying and research. And the variety of perspectives, for example, technologies related to geological storage facility, a creation of the business model, and the support from the government as to how much we can receive them. A variety of perspectives would have to be considered. So from the early stage, we have been involved in the discussion going on so that the risk-related discussion could be started, so that once the project starts, we will be fully prepared to prepare the insurance. Would you please move on to the next slide? Well, as was mentioned in the speeches already been given, I would like to just briefly go through this. This is the expected CCS value chain. The phase-wise, of course, what is emitted would have to be captured, transported, and then injected so that it can be fixed and injected into the underground. And many of the recent projects are considering to conduct the transport and also storage either offshore or under the sea. According to my understanding, up until now, with the CCS project, many of the ones that are already under operation are adopting EOR, and the CCS. Only is not many. Therefore, I understand that this can be considered as one of the new initiatives being conducted within the industry. Next page, please. So, within the value chain related project, what sort of views do we have to have for the risk? As a first step, we decided to work on identification and categorization of the risks. Well, that's the way that we should adopt. What you see here is a very high level the view that shows what sort of risks are available in each of the phase. You can see some examples there. Of course, there are a variety of views that we can adopt to take a look at the risks here. Provision of the insurance, to provide the insurance to each of the stage, what sort of risks would have to be studied. From that standpoint, we have created this list. Whether it is insurable or not, in other words, insurability, well, the financing, and also upon creating or the project, we believe that it is quite important. Therefore, upon doing the large-scale commercial CCS projects, we have to make sure that from the early stage we prepare the countermeasures, or to prove that the countermeasures are being planned from early stage, because that enables the smooth the formulation of the finance, which would eventually lead to the success of the project. At this time, I am not going to get into the details of each of the items, though. First, what sort of events may cause the risks associated here, written here, from the standpoint of the physical property of the CO2, I would like to talk about that starting from the next page. Well, let's remind ourselves as to our understanding about the CO2. Let's put it simple. I have a simple question to you. Is the CO2 dangerous? Well, I think a majority of the people, especially the general public, would say no. There is no way that the CO2 would be dangerous. Well, we are actually inhaling it. It is also used for the fire extinguisher as well. Therefore, compared to the nitrogen, well, people would think that it is much safer from the standpoint of the pollution. Many people would adopt such a thinking. It is around everywhere. And at the same time, I do support the idea that the CO2 is not dangerous, but when it comes to the commercial scale CCS project, well, there are several points that we would have to be cautious about. Well, to stably and safely conduct the operation, there are the minimum the requirements that would have to be fulfilled. I would like to introduce you to those items starting from the following slides. Would you please move on to the next page? CCS, upon conducting the storage, basically it would be the highly compressed CO2 would be used. CO2 is within the air. But if it is too thick, then it is known to be toxic to our bodies. For example, if it goes beyond the 10% in the air, there is a possibility that it may cause the acute the symptom to people. For example, the things include dizziness, sweating, rapid breathing, and unconsciousness. There is even the possibility that it may cause a death. Generally speaking, when the CO2 share is more than 5%, there is a possibility that it may have a bad influence over or against our body. It may be lethal. On the following slide, here I would like to show you another example. For highly compressed CO2 may mix with water, then it can become the carbonic acid. And that may cause corrosion. And within the pipeline, due to some sort of factors or the reasons, the free water may come in, and that may lead to a very serious and severe internal corrosion inside the pipeline. Let me explain to you another example with the following slide. Well, when the CO2 is compressed, we would have to use it at the low temperature. Therefore, the materials such as carbon steel that would compose the pipeline may get cooled down, and it may become the brittle and may cause the crack. So if it leads to the crack, then, well, of course, originally inside the pipeline there is a very high pressure. Therefore, just a slight scar or say the scratch may propagate. That may lead to huge damage. Theoretically, that can be possible. Please, let me mention. It's not that I'm trying to mention that the CCS or the CCUS is very risky. I have no intention to scare you at all. Well, CO2 is a very well-known substance, and those of you who belong to the industry knows as to what sort of countermeasures shall be taken. All of you know very well about those. Though, having said that, when it comes to the commercial scale, if you are to introduce new technologies in unprecedented scale to implement the projects, you have to make sure that you attend for these factors, and you have to confirm that the necessary countermeasures are being prepared from the early stage. Such process would be critical. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to explain from another perspective. Let's say that some sort of incident had occurred due to the factors that I've just explained. Let's say that made it not possible to store or separate the CO2. What sort of consequence may happen? Those of you who are here, well, you may already know that the case example presented here actually have occurred in the reality. This is the actual incident that had occurred. $70 billion was the Australian dollar, so I couldn't do this in my head. But anyhow, the point is that it was a huge LNG project, and $3 billion facilities associated with the carbon capture had been built for this particular project. And 4 million tons worth of CO2 per year was planned to be stored, but in the reality, they could only achieve half of that. Originally, the injection of the CO2 got delayed, and the injection itself actually was successful, but the system for the injection was sound, but the system that was supposed to adjust the pressure of the injected CO2 did not work well. The system got stopped, and because of that, they could not have the CO2 injected or say fixed. That is said to be the reason for this incident. For this project, execution of the CCS was one of the key conditions to receive the approval from the state government. Therefore, because they were not successfully able to conduct the collection and the injection of the CO2 in order to fill the gap, they had to acquire or say surrender 5.23 million worth of greenhouse gas offsets from the carbon markets. Here, The point that I would like to mention here is, as Morishima-san has just mentioned, well, this offset is the point that is going to catch an attention, and this is a particular portion where the risk may arise, as we can learn from this particular case. Next page, please. Starting from this page, I would like to talk about the offset and carbon pricing. What sort of benefits and what sort of exposures that may bring to the CCS industry. As for the details, Morishima-san had already touched upon that. So I would just give you the high-level overview. It goes without saying that the carbon credit, or say the offset, and also the carbon tax, and instead of charging more tax to those who emit it, well, the tax credit to be provided for the carbon reduction. Such systems are going to serve the role as the drivers for deployment of the commercial CCS that are the voluntary ones, and there are also regulated market, and it can be in the form of tax. In regards to these systems available, well, of course, they may serve the role to promote the project, and at the same time, as I mentioned, well, these things may lead to the new exposure that was which is unprecedented. Next page, please. As one example, I would like to talk about the EU and UK emission trading system. This is a so-called cap and trade scheme, and in the UK and EU, well, based on the Paris Agreement, to achieve the target being set, this system had been introduced. The emitters every year would acquire or say be allocated with the free of charge EUA. And in line with the amount emitted for that year, well, if you have exceed with the amount you are required to purchase the EUA, or you can also choose to sell to others in this scheme. Next page, please. Especially, I would like to touch upon the example in the UK. UK government, well, as was mentioned in the GCCS Institute's the presentation, they are currently working on preparing the promotion system, and ATS system is being built in as one of the revenue streams. The government is she going to provide the support. For example, at the risk associated with the CO2 leakage, or the risk of the stoppage of the business interpretation, and so on. They require that the insurance would have to be studied so that the remediation by the government can be considered. Such is the policy being presented by the UK government. Next page, please. Here you can see the case example for the US. Those of you who are here are very much familiar, I believe. This is a tax credit system. This is called Section 45Q. For the CCS, $40 of the tax deduction would be given. It is expected to increase to $85. So in that sense, it is a very much attractive package. Strongly, they are trying to promote the CCS with this system, and at the same time, well, within the wordings of the regulation, it says that if in case the CO2 is to be leaked to the atmosphere, well, the tax deducted part is going to be nullified, or you will be asked to pay the tax for. Such is the indications being made. Well, so that this means that the risks and opportunities are the two sides of the coin and shall be recognized by us as a risk. Starting from here, from this slide on, I would like to talk from the standpoint of the risk and insurance, and I would like to talk about the current status. Well, currently speaking, at the physical level, basically, for activity and the facility for the CCS, well, we understand that it is possible for us to provide insurance for upstream the oil gas development and also the downstream refineries, and also at the insurance being given to the downstream. Well, there is not much difference compared to those insurance. Therefore, the structure of the insurance products can be maintained and can be the same thing can be applied here. Well, amongst the insurance being provided for the oil and gas, there is a case where there are many cases where we provide insurance for the EOR activities. Next page, please. On the other hand, well, let's, for example, in regards to the risks associated with the CO2 leakage, and as a result of the CO2 leakage, well, for example, injuries, or instead of the injury against the body or the damage against the properties, as a form of the carbon pricing, the risk against the company may arise. And I believe this can lead to people considering the hedging by the insurance. Yes, we do recognize that, and we are currently working on the research activities on the daily basis. But on the other hand, we need further studying because to some aspects of it. And at the same time, in terms of the carbon, in regards to the system, it is still under plan. Therefore, there are some uncertainties involved. Therefore, it's not that there are cases where the insurances are being covered in regards to the cases, though I do understand that there is a high expectation being placed by the industry people. Therefore, we believe this is the particular areas where the serious studying would be necessary on our side. Next page, please. Here is the summary for my presentation today. First, in the CCS value chain, upon thinking about the risk and the insurance here, what's important is that we identify the risk thoroughly so that we can understand the impact of them. That's going to be necessary primarily. CO2 is a well-known substance, though under the environment where the CCS activities take place, due to the physical property, a variety of effects or influence may occur. Therefore, we need to make sure that we attend for them. In relation to the CCS, carbon credits, ETS tax credit, and so on. Upon promoting the business, we believe that these can serve as a strong driver, but on the other hand, they can be the risk. Therefore, as an insurance industry, we have already the solutions available for the existing aspects, for which I hope you would consult with us. But against the emerging risks, that we need to conduct further studying on them. Especially as the TMNF, we are looking forward to having the discussion with the people in the industry in regards to them, so that we would be able to come up with a new solution that can attend for the emerging risks. Therefore, it's appreciated if you could call us up so that we can engage in discussion, so that we will be able to further push this industry forward, and we would like to be the one to provide you with the support for that. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. Kobayashi-san, thank you very much for your presentation. From the standpoint of the insurance company, what sort of risks do you recognize and how you perceive the CCS project? Well, we do not get much opportunities to hear such stories. Therefore, in that sense, I think the session was very much useful. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we would like to take comments or questions from the floor if there's any. Please. Well, I belong to the NLs. My name is Nagashima. Within our company, in 2030, we are trying to commercialize the CCS domestically. Therefore, your story was very much interesting to us, especially at our company, NLs. We are the emitter of the CO2, but at the same time, we also do the storage of the CO2. So in that sense, we are unique. In the future, if or when the CCS insurance is available, we have to make sure that the value chain can be covered comprehensively. If such insurance becomes available, it would be very much great. So I would like to know your take on that. Thank you very much for your question. I think what you mentioned presented a very important perspective. The business model itself is something that you are currently considering. And I've talked from the standpoint of each value chain, but there are, of course, cases where the one company may handle all the stages of the value chain. Of course, to make sure that we can cover the interface risk, we have to prepare the right design of the insurance. So in that sense, we are going towards the same direction, but we still haven't seen the specific examples, meaning we have to take a look at the variety of specific case examples to study that. Therefore, it's appreciated if I would be able to consult with you offline separately. Thank you. Well, the discussion with the operators, I think, would be necessary, right? Because there are different assumptions and prerequisites for each business, which is difficult to have one solution being applied to everyone. Anyone else? One more person over there. Thank you very much. My name is Ako. I belong to the Asahi Kasei company. I have a question. CO2 leakage and can be one of the risks for the commercialization of the CCS according to your explanation. Let's say that the CO2 that had been collected with the negative emission, if we are to store them, I think that we would not be able to say that there would be no effect to the global warming. But I think we have to take a look at such case from a different perspective. Any take on that? Well, I think your talk was based on the assumption that the leakage had a huge impact. But what about the case when the CO2 collected with the negative emission leaks? It is true. From the standpoint of recovering the loss, what you mentioned would not fit the case examples that I presented. On the other hand, rather than the loss, from the standpoint of the missed opportunity, not being from the standpoint of the providers of the negative emission service, if you fail in supplying the service, it may lead to the decline of the revenue. So you may end up facing the loss compared to what you expect. So I think in that sense, analogy-wise, it might be similar. So instead of just looking at the leakage itself, what's important is that we consider coming up with an insurance that would be able to cover such aspects in overall. Yes. For example, ETS or the compliance, or say with the monetary value, if the risks it can be evaluated or quantified in such a way, I think it fits very well with the concept of the insurance. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments from the floor? If not, then we'll Let me take a look and see. There are no questions from the people who are joining online. So with this, we would like to close the presentation sessions. We would like to take 30 minutes break from now.